Is when I was using the little Bluetooth one, that it has a blinking blue light, and it was going to be.
Okay, so Skype is telling me to avoid legal snags and
Uh-huh.
tell people that they're being recorded. So
Okay.
you're being recorded.
Hey, man.
So I guess we should welcome anyone who's nutty enough to listen or watch to listen or watch the first episode of our little endeavor. Great things are simple. That's not to say that all simple things are great, because this is pretty freaking simple right now. Greatness, let's hope, will be thrust upon us in the future.
Yes, I concur.
So, if you don't mind, I kind of have a weird idea. Not necessarily a weird idea, but I have a weird idea. I just repeated myself. This is
Just
gonna be
go.
awesome.
Use the.
Yeah. So I have an idea of how we can get started, and
Okay.
and basically anyone that's willing to take this little adventure. I think it's important to know about people. So, kind of brief background about me, and then brief background about you. And if I'm leaving anything out, and you can add to it, by all means, let me know.
Yeah, for sure, man.
But so my name is Darren, and it's kind of weird that I'm talking to you, but I'm talking to other people out there. I guess this is what broadcasters feel like.
It's like therapy.
Oh yeah, by all means, by all means. Well, like as we got started, or as I was talking to you about this, one of the things was, like, I mentioned that I've been sitting on the sidelines for a while, and like I feel like I need to do something, and that's gonna kind of get into why we're doing this and what we're doing.
I don't want to cut you off real quick, but I know I kind of, when we spoke real quick in emails and stuff the other day, said it was kind of funny that you said that, but I've been, for a long time now, I've had the urge to write or do something, a blog, something, just to, sounds funny, but I've kind of had this sense of, not immortality, more or less, but of, like, just kind of wanting to leave something behind. Even if it's just something small. So I kept thinking about wanting to write some stuff and maybe just do like a blog, but then it was cool, man. You just kind of threw that out there, and I was like, holy shit, this is like exactly what I've been thinking of, dude. But, I didn't, you were like right there, and it's like, dude, why didn't we talk about this a long time ago and make plans to do something like this? Of course, life's always in the way, but.
Yeah, exactly. And for the longest time, I've tried to do this on my own a couple of times, and I've had some false starts where I get like two episodes in the can, and there's no one else that I'm really being held accountable to. And right. I figure if I'm having like a slow day or slow week, and I'm like, man, and then you reach out and you say, hey, dude, come on, let's get another one in the can.
Yeah.
It's a lot better.
Yeah.
But so as I said, my name's Darren. I got Mike on the horn here. We grew up together. We met in high school. And
junior high. We met in junior high. We didn't become friends till high school, though.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Okay, well, we knew of each other in junior high.
Yeah, so our bromance was kindled, I guess, in high school, and I grew up like middle class, suburbs.
Okay, but go back, man. You've got an interesting start to life. Well, I found interesting. You don't always meet someone with a situation such as yours.
So, what, like the Graylians? You want me to get into that?
Yeah. Your reptilian nature, all that kind of
thing. So, my mom was born and raised in Southern California. My dad was born and raised in England, a suburb of London. And my dad had migrated to Australia. He said he wanted to migrate to either the States or Australia and kind of get out of the UK. Maybe it was the weather, I don't know. But he was living in Australia, the Sydney area. No, maybe the Melbourne area. But anyways, definitely an ocean or two away. And he was sent to Southern California on business, where he met my mom. And they dated for a little while. They wrote letters. And then they eventually got married when, well, obviously when he asked her. That's kind of a no-brainer. But they wrote letters for a while. She eventually moved to Australia. And so kind of a side note, but some of the things that I'll eventually talk about, I think this little key or this little tidbit will become key, where they weren't originally expecting to have kids, or they weren't planning on kids anyways. And since here, sorry, just doing a minor adjustment. But so they weren't originally planning to have kids, but they were living in Australia. She didn't have any family around. He didn't have any family around, and it was just the two of them. So apparently they said, "Hey, let's have kids so we're not lonely when we're old." And I don't know about you, but that's not the best reason to have kids. And this is one of those things that I'm pretty sure it was my mom told me either as I was growing up or once I grew up. And I I think as I talk about my past, like I'll share things like this. Well, that might help give people an insight into who I am and all of that good stuff.
No, I mean, it's definitely pertinent stuff. And the only reason it dawned on me to ask you that right off the bat was because, going back to when we met, the one thing that I always kind of equate with you was you just having that little bit of knowledge. Like, I mean, I've always been like open to other cultures and try and learn. That's why people think I'm kind of...
Wait. By other cultures, do you mean white people in other countries?
Well, just anybody. I mean...
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Unfortunately, in my life, I've run into too many people that never got outside the county line, which is pretty scary, But anyway, out of that context, it's just meeting you as, someone that's actually... You were kind of the first person my age that I really knew that had even been to Europe or,
lands far away.
Yeah, and just, little things that you kind of turned me on to, like little differences between the cultures, and that just fascinated me, and that really kind of turned me on to, at this point in my life, I consider myself an Anglophile to a certain degree, but just, for a lot of different reasons. But anyway, that's just the one thing that always kind of struck me about you. It was cool. You were almost kind of worldly, like the way you thought. Well, and compared to my family, who they were, Mom was third generation. Dad's family's been here, which we can get into later also. But I thought it was kind of cool. I'll let you know. But my dad's side of the family has been on this continent longer than... Actually, predating like the very beginning of the French, French colonization. But anyway.
Oh wow.
So it was kind of like I saw me as kind of like a American, like just and you were kind of...
Yours this foreigner.
Yeah, exactly, man. So wise to the world.
Yeah,
no, but it was cool, man, because that's kind of who I was, dude. And that just... Yeah, like I said, keyed me into you, and Anyway, so continue.
Oh, okay. So, my parents ended up starting the process of having kids when they were in Australia, and my dad had an opportunity. I guess it was like a promotion or whatever, but it entailed them moving back to England. So he had been there, she had not, and from what I understand, I guess the decision was hers, maybe. And she was like, "Hey, I've never been to England, so I'm game, So they moved to England. My brother was born, I was born, and after about 2 winters in the UK, she said, "I've had enough. I want to go back home." And
winter is coming.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess they didn't have an opportunity to go back to Australia. No job prospects. So they moved back to Southern California. And I mean, it's kind of funny how like, oh, I'm this worldly person, but like I moved back to or I moved to Southern California when I was 10 months old. So as I was concerned, like, yeah, I may have been born someplace else, but I grew up as American as apple pie.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
guess maybe also to a degree is like just I've always like been interested in people's story, like
Oh
just in
yeah,
a
yeah,
broad
by
sense,
all
like
means.
even groups of people, like how did they end up where they are, and so yeah, that was always cool.
Yeah, I definitely like to hear people's stories where sometime last year I was traveling for work, and I took an Uber from my house down to the airport, and it's like an hour or so drive, and the whole time it was just chit chat, you know, and it was like, so where are you from, and what do you do, and this is my story, and then when I got to where I was going, um, the uh, the Uber driver was from Somalia, and that might give you a clue of where I flew into. You know, if you're familiar with kind of
Geography.
politics in America and whatnot,
Yeah.
but that might be a little clue. But I was interested in how he got there. I asked the dude about Trump and what he thought of Trump, you
Hmm.
know, and like I'll have topics or like I'll talk about anything, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But so I pretty much grew up in Southern California. It was your average growing up. I'd say I had like a pretty good childhood as far as like I didn't have any needs. I didn't really suffer from any wants. We traveled. We had a couple of nice extravagant vacations growing up, you know. And like as far as when I was growing up, I don't really remember my parents talking about politics at all. And like while that doesn't have to be the main or the only point of what we're doing here, I think it's going to be like a large majority of it because of the state of not only the world but the country, you know.
Are you talking in a way of indifference or in a way of openness? And
So like ultimately, I believe, and I know this is correct because everyone I know teaches their kid this when they're growing up. And basically the best way to sum it up is don't start a fight, you know.
don't
And
start none, won't be none.
yeah, and like the grown up way is do not initiate force, you know. And then the libertarian phrasing would be the non-aggression principle, you
Hmm.
know. So so what I try and live by is don't start don't start anything with anyone, like don't initiate force, and the world can be like a huge happy place,
Yeah.
you know. And so like I don't care what your background is, I don't care what you do, but like if you beat your wife, we got problems, you know. If
Yeah.
you try and steal from me, we got problems, you know.
That's one of the things that I thought it'd be interesting to talk about at some point down the road is I get the sense, of course, because I know the people in our age group better than most, but there's a
Oh,
what
29 by the way.
what's
20
that?
that's how old I am,
Oh,
29.
okay, 29. Yeah, our age group.
If anyone believes that, I have some property, nice oceanfront property in Arizona.
Don't make me take my hat off and show you the certificate of age. What was I saying?
Our age group.
Oh, anyway, but we seem to, not across the board because there's always variances, but our generation seems to have a pretty concrete set of values, and at least in a broad sense, uh, that kind of went to shit at some point, man. And I'm sure there's a lot of things, but I always try and figure out what changed at what point and when did it start. I don't know. I just remember a lot of people that we knew, even if they weren't as intelligent as we were, they still appreciated a solid argument, you know? And they were pretty open to accepting of new things and new ways, and I just don't know when it, I don't know.
Like the first person who yells and shouts or freaks out loses the argument.
Right, right.
And that's a lot of what's going on today. But I don't mean to
No.
steer what we're
Get
doing,
back, get back.
so growing up, like I don't ever really remember my parents talking politics because my dad was an immigrant and he had a green card up until the day he passed away, so he couldn't vote. But like I know a couple of things that he believed, but those are more like he wasn't a fan of guns. He didn't like tattoos, and I have tattoos and guns, and I mean, so we didn't see eye to eye. But I know he was smart enough where I could have told him about the non-aggression principle and like not initiating force, and I'd like to think he would have been open enough to, if he didn't agree wholeheartedly, he would have at least said, I see your point of view.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, the impression I always got of your parents was that they just seemed to be, I would say open. I mean, I don't know to what extent, but they just seemed to kind of not, politics and that kind of thing was just something that wasn't worth being concerned about. And I think that in a lot of ways, looking back then, a lot of people were like that back then. There just wasn't this constant day-to-day pitched battle of ideologies.
Yeah.
So as far as I
uh,
was just going to say, I think, like, in a lot of ways, our parents' main concern were their job and, those things that were immediately, things that were affecting them. The bigger picture just wasn't such a focus of everything in their life.
well, also you have to think about how much the government has grown since we were kids.
Oh yeah.
And with a government that much smaller, you wouldn't have to put that much thought and energy into the size, the power, the force of government. Where these days it's trying to get into every nook and cranny.
Yeah.
And like I remember when I was in college, which 20 years ago now is about when I graduated. So yeah, about 20 years ago, maybe more like 18, because I did some like post bachelor's stuff. And like as a side note, I don't throw that out there. So like my degree, it's one of those things. I don't regret it because I got through college without any student loans. Like the day I graduated, I didn't have any debt, but I did some stuff after getting my bachelor's, and that is like one of the biggest regrets that I've had because I still carry debt from that. And like knowing what I know now, if I had it to do over again, I probably would not go to college. Or if I went, I'd go for like computer science and I'd like buckle down and get through and I'd be done and I wouldn't do any like masters or anything like that.
Yeah, but I agree. And the whole thing or the whole system, everything's changed since we were going through. I mean,
yeah.
Just the.
Well, hell, I remember it was $12 a unit at the junior college with ashtrays that I was going to.
Right.
You know, and like, I know now it's way more than $12 a unit at a local JC.
Yeah. But even just I mean, if you look at the big picture, back when we were going through, there was at least an expectation of a decent job market when you got to the other side. Now you've got, it's turned into just this huge machine that churns people through the college system, empties their pockets and spits them out the other end with no promise of a future,
Well, like I thought that there was a decent job market. And so when I was going to school, like I just went and I didn't know what I wanted to do for a living. And even to this day, I think, what do I want to do for a living? What do I want to do when I grow up? because I have a pretty solid gig, not 8 to 5 now, but it's one of those things like I'm kind of indirectly working for the man, and like sometimes my soul gets crushed when I think about it too much. But like I think it's pretty recession proof. I'm not really causing harm to anyone, so it's not like it's not that bad. And now these days I get to work from home, so it's kind of a like someone else would be doing my job, and like ultimately, if we were back in 1939 Germany, like, hey, I'm just doing my job. like we learned that that's not okay, you know. But like I remember people having these heated discussions about when we were going into Iraq after 9/11, and there was some guy saying like weapons of mass destruction and this and that, and like this dude was getting heated, and someone else was like, well, yeah, I don't know if we should go in and invade, and I was sitting there like I don't know, like I'm not going to war, so I don't know. And like I always kind of figured I was in the middle of the road. Like I registered as an independent. I remember when I was like 21 or 22. I lost your video just in case you're not aware.
Yeah, I had to drop out for a second. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I'm listening. I'm listening.
Oh, okay. So I was when I was like 21 or 22, I took one of those like politics tests, and it came up and said that I was libertarian. So I was like, that seems pretty reasonable. So I kind of thought I was a libertarian for a while. And growing up, I kind of assumed that I was a pacifist too, because like.
Yeah, you always were kind of a pussy.
Yeah, I know.
No.
You are what you eat, right?
Yeah. No, you always struck me as a pretty easygoing person. I always felt I had a little more of a violent streak in me.
Yeah, like it's one of those things like to actually want to do violence or anything like that. Like it just seems like a lot of nonsense.
Well, yeah,
you know?
and it wasn't that. I mean, mine was definitely would have been justifiable homicide, but I mean, I think again, being that you're 10 months less of an American than me, it's just inbred into our DNA that you gotta walk tall and carry a big stick. So
Yeah.
And then again, that was kind of like. It's really hard to explain to you and articulate, but meeting you and your parents at that point in my life, it was like you guys were just kind of different. And it wasn't a big difference, and I can't articulate it, but...
Well, I remember you freaked out on my dad's accent, and I said, what accent? Because I had always heard him as my dad.
Yeah.
And your big thing was like, oh, Ducati. Beautiful motorcycle, Ducati. And I was like, dude, I don't hear it. But
honestly, I admired the way you said things. It was just really cool. Because he said, like, the way he articulated the words and, where he put the emphasis and things.
Yeah.
Completely different.
So like, kind of moving along, I'll admit, I was one of the a-holes in '08 that voted for Obama. Like, I don't know if I got hoodwinked by hope and change, but to this day, and I believe it was like a day or two ago, my wife and I were talking about like the '08 and elections, and my father-in-law said Obama's a socialist, and my wife and I kind of looked at each other and we were like that's going a bit far, like, yeah, he's a Democrat, but like tone it down a little bit. And now I look at my father-in-law as a socialist, where I'm like, dude, what's with you and like Social Security and all of this,
Right.
But I also remember making a comment to my brother where we were talking about the Affordable Care Act, and my comment to him was, it's a noble attempt to try and make sure that all of your citizens have health care. And I look back and I think, I was fucking retarded, man. And like, it's weird because by the time it was Obama and Romney, I was commuting like 70 miles to work each way. And I don't think I was specifically upset with like, oh, Obama's this or Obama's that. I just thought like these two idiots are who we have to choose for like the highest office in the land. And I was dumbfounded. Like I couldn't understand it. And as I was driving my 70 miles to work every day, if anyone out there is familiar, Southern California traffic, the 91 freeway, it's not fun. But it would take me like 2.5 hours, to cover 70 miles each way. And I remember I would be sitting in traffic, and to my left, there would be the hills of Orange County that pretty much separate the 5 and the 15 freeway, if anyone cares to look up the geography. And I'd look at the hills and I would think, you know what? If government would just go away and it meant that I need to get some kick-ass 4-wheel drive Jeep to be able to get over the hills to go to work, I would take that bet in a heartbeat. And it was right about that time where I was listening to podcasts, and that was back in the day where people would kind of say like a pod what, but I was listening to podcasts, and one of the podcasts had a sibling on of one of the hosts, and they mentioned his name, Alex Jones, who's now infamous, but back then he wasn't nearly as known.
Blackhawk helicopters.
Yeah, and like he was passionate, and he gave just enough information for me to think, let me check this guy out. And like to this day, I will listen, because I don't do video all that much, but I will listen to almost every single InfoWars episode. Now I will admit the dude is nutty, like batshit nutty. He goes off on crazy tangents, and I think he'd be much more successful if he talked around a few things. Like he'll get crazy and say like, man, the Chi-Coms and this and that. Yeah. And it's like, dude, just say like we're going down a path that we don't want to go down,
Yeah.
So it was about that time that I got introduced to Alex Jones. And as I was as I was online looking at YouTube, I remember a comment on a video that mentioned something to the effect of the people that are like classical liberals, if they would only be exposed to Molyneux, it would be like a better place, or like they're so close. Mm-hmm. And now Molyneux, for those of you that know, he's a philosopher. He's a lot of people say like he's a bad dude and he breaks up families and whatnot. But if you listen to his arguments, like that's pretty much where I am today. And actually, if you bear with me a minute, I have, where the flip? Okay, so share screen. Okay, so I have the perfect meme that describes where I'm at today as far as politically, philosophically, and what I talk to with other people. So if we look right here, we got, me normally, our government's corrupt at every level. Fuck the law. Civil war now. Let it burn. But, oh, dude, how did you make that shit jump out?
What'd you
do? Can I? Oh, maybe that can. Yeah, I don't know. So like that's how I normally am. It's like this thing's a big catastrophe. It's like someone's got their bow and they've got kindling and they're starting the fire. But if anyone is like, man, fuck America, I'm like, you piece of shit. It's the greatest country ever in the history of the world, And I think this meme like sums me up perfectly right now, where I think you're kind of more along the lines of like a minarchist attitude, where we should have a government that protects our our basic human rights and our property, but it shouldn't be allowed to grow beyond that. And like I would reach out a hand to those people and be like, yeah, let's join forces, because I see people like you excuse me, where I see people like you where when those people see like, wow, everything's better, it's like, you know what? Let's cut away this last little bit and think how good it can be, because everything improved when we got it down this small. Let's put the rest in the trash bin and it'll be that much better for everyone else, you know?
Yeah.
So that's that kind of sums up me and like how I am and all of that good stuff. So let me stop sharing my screen so much. Or here, let's just do this. There we go. That's good enough. So do you want to run down a history of you?
Yeah, first I just wanted to ask you, so just in your own words, what's your goal, your aim with the podcast?
So okay, kind of how I said when we started, like, I feel like I need to do something, and right now there's so like I've had some false starts in the past, and by false starts, like I've done like my own little shows, like, hey, here's the news of the week, but like getting that shit down is a lot of work, you know, and when there's no one to go back and forth with, it takes a lot of effort. And right now there's like wife and 5 kids. It's tough to fit in all of the other work that goes into doing that.
Right.
So if we can take like at least an hour to start with each week and see if we can grow this and then maybe it'll be worth it to put more effort into more into like more production, more videos, better quality, and all of that good stuff. But basically, like my idea for this show is to speak positivity, have one more voice of logic and reason. And I mean, with the way a lot of big tech is now, even though we're uploading this on YouTube, I don't think we're going to be around YouTube for a while. But it's kind of weird because like Tommy Robinson, I assume you're familiar with him.
Not quite.
Okay, cool. So he's like the more sane version of Alex Jones in the UK. Although a lot of people would say that he and Alex are like hand in hand, and but he's brought light to the Rotherham grooming gangs in the UK, and a lot of the grooming gangs. Are you familiar with the grooming gangs?
I believe so.
Okay, so for anyone out there, if you just search grooming gang UK, it'll get you a little red pill. But so like he's no longer.
That's that's predator trafficking, right?
Well, it's developing, at least initially, innocent relationships with young, vulnerable women, and like the purpose is ultimately to bed those women, sometimes forcefully, but at like a lot of times statutory rape, you know.
Okay.
But a lot of these cases are the vast majority are people with backgrounds that aren't historically from the UK, if you get my meaning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they prey on specifically historically UK women.
Okay.
So it seems like there's kind of a pattern there, but the media over there won't necessarily shine a light on it until they absolutely have to.
Right.
So my ultimate goal for this show, I guess, program, I don't know, is like to get the word out. And the word is freedom, like the idea that people are clamping down on free speech is mind-boggling. Like I remember growing up, the idea was let as many ideas out there, and the best ones will rise to the top. And when you have people like Mr. Jones being like exiled from the internet, pretty much. I mean, he definitely still has his domain, but as far as social media in general, like he's persona non grata. You know, he's being excommunicated from from a lot of those platforms. And when you can still see things from like out and out racists and people that talk about the proper way to beat their wives and stuff like that. But the big thing about Alex Jones is like the Newtown shooting. Like, I'm sorry for those people that lost loved ones, but like that's not really a reason to kick someone off of to kick someone off of your platform. And you see more and more these rules are being applied unilaterally, where if we came out and we were like orange man bad and we were saying like I was with her and all of that, we'd never be thrown off of like any social media platform.
Right.
And like I once upon a time had a Facebook account, but I got rid of that a couple of years ago. But I'm active on Gab, Well, like for a couple of years, I just had an account, but more recently, I kind of thought I need to be more proactive and put the good word out. But basically, when it comes to the idea of the non-aggression principle, like all I'm going to do is sit here and talk until someone comes and knocks on my door and says, hey, you've been saying the wrong things and now you need to come with me. Like, I don't think so. But if you look historically throughout the world, every time people on the left gain power, it ends bad. French Revolution, Bolshevik Revolution, Mao, Cambodia, like these people get into power and it's fucking horrible. It's devastating. And it's always done in the guise of, we want to make things better. We want I don't know, we want everyone to be able to do whatever they want. But it's weird when you make more and more laws to be able to let people do things. But it's like, no. You need to strip away laws because...
I have a theory about this. You want to hear my theory?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Because I've paid attention to that argument too about people with socialist systems and other forms of government. And like you said, a lot of them seem to be predisposed to going south really fast. But I think that's because, people like to debate, is it still a valid form of government? Is it just that it hasn't been done right? But I think the innate problem with it is that from the get-go, the odds are just stacked so much in the government's favor. There's a power that's built into the system automatically from the get-go. It's just so much more prone to, the things that eventually cause it to go south. And I think I've kind of self-debated this, like, well, how do we know any form of government is the correct form of government, with democracy or, I don't even know what we are now, and yeah, we've had a pretty good run as a country, but that's because, from the start, it was, I think, intended to be a good thing with those checks and balances and, trying to level the playing field in every direction. But obviously, after a couple hundred years, they've legally backdoored anything that was of any good in the Constitution. So,
yeah,
uh,
and
I don't know.
there's
That's one of the things I look forward to talking about with you is just kind of like, where do you go from here? Because there's really no clear answer, because you can't continue to keep going the way we are with this system the way it is, because there's just so many ways for it to go downhill badly. And but so then what's the alternative?
so I think the alternative is so I when you and I spoke previously, you said you don't want to go full 1776, and like I definitely get that. So if I'm going too far, you just pull in the reins and be like, "Whoa, cowboy!"
Oh no, that's why I'm here, dude.
Like you're going, and like by no means am I saying like call to arms, get your battle rifles anywhere, But
Yeah.
I think we're heading down that road, and I don't think that there's anything anyone can do to stop that from happening. And for those people that are familiar with Molyneux, and you and I have like had brief conversations in the past, like about him, and I know about him, but I don't know how much you listen to him. But like I listen to a shit ton of what he puts out there,
Yeah.
and it's all evidence based. And anyone who says like, "Oh, you're racist," that's not an argument. Like, okay, what if I am? Like, call me whatever name you want, but from that point on, you need to have an argument that has nothing to do with whether or not someone's a racist, because that's like saying you have black hair. Who cares?
Right.
Like, hey, your mouth was sewn shut, so I can still write and make an argument. And I was speaking with with my wife recently, and I think I may have mentioned this to you also. But it's one of those things where when you're arguing, you got to stay cool, you got to stay calm, and the first person to freak out, like they're losing the argument, because if someone knows that they're right, they're going to be calm, they're going to give the facts, they're going to give their argument. And if the other person's just like, "No, you're crazy," it's like they're getting unsettled. And when I've mentioned this to people, they'll say like, "Oh, but someone's passionate," but you can tell passion from freaking out. Like, they're two completely different things,
Yeah.
And when the tech super giants of the platform that this is mainly going to go out on, and the blue and white F, when they're silencing people, it means that they don't have an argument and they just want people to shut up. And like I started to go to this point a little earlier, but it's one of those things that I truly believe that Alex Jones, the sole reason he was kicked off of YouTube is because he was effective. And he's effective at like not discouraging the narrative, countering the narrative. He might be crazy as shit, but like he'll throw things out there, and he actually has good, legitimate people on his show.
And that's the thing. What I was going to bring up is that, do you remember a show called Coast to Coast on the radio? Did you ever listen to it?
Is it Art Bell or?
Yeah, it used to be back in the day. But anyway, I mean, it's kind of a lot more to do with like paranormal and
Yeah, yeah.
stuff, UFO and stuff. And yeah, I knew that, but it was also one of those cool things where, some of this stuff you would look into and you would find about, because people would call them with stories, and some of it was kind of loosely based on factual events or whatever, but you could kind of come away with it with a little bit of takeaway because you may have started to read about something you never would have come across otherwise. And I think Alex Jones is the same in a lot of ways in that he has, if you think about it in terms of he has to do it in a way that's going to get people to watch. And, that's
Oh
why
yeah.
right now, I mean, you have no viewers because we're just not a whole lot to watch. But like he said, and I don't know if you caught the last one he was on with Joe Rogan, and I mean, he gets in that hyper mood where he starts rattling stuff off, but when you slow him down, and Joe would be like, "Hey man, Jamie, look this up." I mean, a lot of it was legit stuff. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think that's the problem. Is it's like on the one hand they don't want to draw attention to him, but at the same time, I think he's putting a lot of pressure in people asking questions, and I think
Yeah.
I don't understand in this day and age in this country how people choose not to question things,
Well,
and they
if you
question the wrong things, and I know it's all media driven and that, but they end up focusing on the wrong things when there's bigger questions and with a lot bigger ramifications.
yeah, and like if you look historically, the United States getting into the Spanish American War. Like, I don't know the official status, but last time I heard, it's believed to be a false flag, where I believe every single officer that was stationed on the ship, which was in Havana Harbor, was off the ship, and it was nothing but uh, uh, black, African American, whatever terminology you want to use, but it was nothing but like those enlisted men that were on the ship when it exploded.
Yeah,
And it's one of those things like that's awfully convenient. Like, shouldn't there have been at least one officer on board that was killed?
yeah.
So it's believed that was a false flag to get us into war. And then uh, during World War II, um, Roosevelt, like he either had an idea or knew something was coming, and he wanted like all of the ships in Hawaii that were older. Like I think it's been a while since I've gone over this, but I think most of the damage was in like older stuff, and it probably wouldn't have been that effective in a war anyways.
Well, none
You
of
know,
the
so
none of
so
the
us
carriers were in port.
yeah, so it's one of those things that like us getting into World War II, where it probably was going to happen regardless because we got into World War One, but I think it was at least done sooner.
Yeah.
And then like I'm not sure if you've kept abreast of this, but the U.S. getting into Vietnam, it was done because of the Gulf of Tonkin, where it was like one or two North Vietnamese PT boats fired on U.S.
Oh,
ships.
yeah, 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 yeah.
It never happened.
Right, right, right.
So that and that was like 75,000 Americans died because of a lie,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I
So
know.
so when you have these historical situations and like I'm going to jump down the conspiracy rabbit hole here.
It's okay, man. Because you know what, I like a good conspiracy because, in my opinion, they fully do exist to some extent, one extent or another.
Well,
Like you said,
the
there's
government
been
charges
proven.
people with conspiracy all the time.
Right, right, right,
Like there's conspiracy to commit murder, you know?
right, right, right.
And when you take all of those into account and then you look at 9/11, and from what I understand, like that movie Loose Change, there's some inaccuracies in there, but if you have people like Madeleine Albright who testified before Congress, and when she was asked whether or not the embargo of Iraq, which was responsible for the death of 500,000 Iraqi children, was worth it, she said it was worth it. So right there, she's like, yeah, like, I don't care if 500,000 children had to die. What's a few thousand in downtown New York?
Right.
You know, like that literally changed the country, and it gave permission to the U.S. government for things that maybe they were already doing, but it was
Yeah, I
like,
think it's a lot broader than that, though, man. I think we're at a point where it's just become so commonplace that even when you do question it, it's just so quickly eclipsed by the next thing coming down the pike that you don't even have a chance to I mean, look at back in the day, like the Warren Report, and things like that. It took years, and how in depth they were, and how focused people were when it came out finally. And
is
I mean,
that
I
the
know,
Kennedy one?
yeah, but
Yeah.
it's just and I know everybody was waiting for this last report, and just since we're throwing our cards down on the table here, I know I kind of told you at a certain point, and I recognized that it was probably around the time that you said, like you had voted for Obama, and then you kind of got challenged in the way you were thinking about things. And I'm kind of the same. I had a lot of hope with Obama, but then, I mean, something just changed when he came in. I think it started before with Bush, but it got to where it just became a big echo chamber, and it was the constant back and forth, and I seriously had to tune out for my own mental health. And I'm aware of the stuff going on, but there's probably going to be a lot of stuff I'm going to have to ask you to kind of walk me through. But I think that's good, for the sake of the podcast, because then we can kind of question things as we break them down. So
Yeah.
anyway, I just wanted
Yeah.
to throw that out there.
Yeah. No, I get you. I get you. But like it's kind of going back. Anytime the left gains power, it ends up pretty bad, you know. And like a lot of people mention the Bolsheviks and Mao, but like really a great example is the French Revolution, where that largely gets overlooked. But it was the whole guillotine, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And like um I'd like to kind of hear about your evolution a little bit. Like, what were your parents like growing up and all of that good stuff?
Oh boy. So, like I said, mom and dad were um, mom's side of the family is basically mostly Italian. I think third generation. My great grandparents had come over. Um, my dad's family, he's mostly French, and my family goes all the way back to like some of the first land grants that I forget who was king at the time in France there did on the.
Probably Louis. There were a lot of Louis.
Yeah, one of the Louis. But anyway, so he ended up going there, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff we were able to find online. Kind of interesting story. But so anyway, yeah, the family's been on the continent for how many hundreds of years now? Almost 400 years going on. Um, so mom's family ended up in L.A., so she was born and raised in L.A. Very much, of course, my mom's a person unto herself, but just a very
Is
open.
that a good thing or like a?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Okay,
what
cool.
I'm saying is my mom is a sweetheart and a saint, and
Okay.
as far as I'm concerned. But I think kind of more indicative of like the California culture, even up through the 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, just a very open person uh, in every way. I mean, I never grew up looking at anybody differently because of their race or their religion or, even I kind of remember a time when we were a little younger when it kind of became more open for people to even talk about homosexuality. And as a kid, kind of like, well, what is this? What does gay mean?
Well,
But I never had any sort of negativity applied to it. So,
like I just want to throw this out there because you mentioned that, but I remember like it was kind of talked about in my family that my grandfather wasn't too keen on Mexicans,
Mm-hmm.
but he was learning Spanish and he loved mariachi music.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know how you can square that circle, but it seems kind of,
Well,
but like he didn't hate anyone. I think his mindset was like, meh, not for me,
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
know?
Well, and that's, like I said, my mom would kind of been more of a product of she was born in the mid 50s, so probably the mid 60s and that whole kind of movement. Not that she was a hippie or anything, but my grandparents were a little more conservative, but even things that I heard from them, it was, I hate to say it, but kind of like when we were kids, which I'd like to touch on one day, is like you could kid around and call a guy not one of the bad ones, but a racial slur, and just giving each other
Like limey.
yeah, like joking around, or like
Yeah.
calling I'll probably get in trouble for this, but calling your Latino buddy a wetback, hey, what's up, wetback, or just
Yeah.
giving
Like
each other a hard time, but nobody ever
people
looked
weren't
like.
so uptight.
Right. Nobody, there was absolutely no weight attached to it. Nobody would have looked at you. I mean, maybe if you did it in church, but even if parents heard a couple teenage kids saying it to each other, nobody would have gotten all, in a dither and called the police or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was just we were different. We were the same. We got along the best we could. Sometimes people had a shitty disposition towards each other, but that was not the norm. In a
Yeah.
lot of ways, I don't know where all this perceived racism and sexism and all this stuff came from. Because
Yeah. So like be because you're touching upon that. So I don't like I, I don't have the need to be specific about our joined history or anything, but I think it's kind of good that it's just known we grew up in the Southern California megalopolis, you know? Like it was like 45 minutes to an hour to downtown LA if you had the need to go there, which my family went there maybe for auto shows, uh, to see the Phantom of the Opera, but
Dodger games.
yeah, Dodger games once in a blue moon. But other than that, like there was really no need. And like I think our school was maybe like 50 to maybe 60% white, and then a large majority Latino,
Yeah,
and then like a
there's some pretty
small
good African
majority,
American though. They were pretty good.
like 10-20%.
Yeah, I mean, and
Okay,
up,
and like a smaller percent Asian, but
yeah,
would you say that the white kids were above or below 50%?
yeah, thereabouts. Like
Okay, so like right somewhere in 50%, because
yeah.
so here's something that my wife and I talk about on a somewhat regular basis, where I look back on public school and I think it's a joke. Like my the fact that my brother graduated high school is kind of laughable, and not because he wasn't smart and not because he's not smart, but because he didn't do anything. Like I remember, well, he partied, like he definitely partied.
But in
Uh,
all honesty, brother, I didn't try either.
well,
I think it
yeah, I
was
didn't
too
try
easy for
either.
me.
Like I didn't try either because there was no real motivation to try. Like I'm gonna graduate high
I,
school and then I'm gonna go to high school part two, I guess, because that's what people do.
I wanted your opinion
Eventually,
on
I'll
this.
be an adult.
This
But
occurred to me one day, and I wanted your opinion real quick. I hate to cut you off, but
no,
this was
no,
really
no, please.
important for me to ask you. Did you ever, at any point, get a sense that I would say the guys more so, I wasn't paying attention so much to what the girls were doing, but the guys in our age group took a lot longer to figure out what the hell to do with their life? It just seemed like I knew a lot of guys that just came out of the gate not knowing what they wanted to do, not knowing what to do next. Not for lack of wanting to, just really having no idea.
Yeah, so I think and like I might be off by a few years, but I think we were so we graduated in 95. So we're like there's this micro generation that I've read about, and we're not like Generation X and we're not Generation Y. We are the people that grew up without the internet, but we're still young enough to adapt to the internet because it was starting to catch on when we were young enough to be like, hey, this is cool, let's check it out.
Right.
And I remember sitting in a movie theater in like when they first started putting the web address in advertisements before the movie would start.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, one day every business is going to have a website, you know? And it's one of those but like the internet was still new and it was this awesome thing, you know, where it was kind of like AOL was still something, but it was slowly going away because websites were coming about, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we were the first generation where everyone goes to college. And I think the generation before us, trades were still looked at in a positive light. And I think the truly smart people around our age still looked at trades really well.
Did you ever get like a negativity from your parents if you talked about things other than like getting a college education?
So
I guess in a sense, like I used to bring up certain things, and maybe it's just my parents and their situation, and not that they ever had any trouble or anything. On the contrary, they were always very financially conservative and did their shit right. But there was always a fear of like, you got to have a good enough job, you know, to get the good enough benefits and have that stability, you know, almost to a point of like instilling a fear, you know, like almost like, well, I can't really pursue what I'd love to do, so I've got to compromise and, you know.
So to kind of answer your question, um, I know my mom. I'm not sure if this is the right word, but I think she resented my dad because my dad was smart, but the way she put it, he didn't have the drive. You know, like he didn't have the desire to
Like
go to school and get a degree and whatever. But because he grew up in the UK and the way they do things is he had tests early on and he was put in like the smart person track. But I think he was like, and like a little bit about him is, from what I understand, like my dad didn't talk a lot about himself growing up, but his parents were servants in like a wealthy person's house,
like
you know?
Downton.
Fuck if I know, dude. But from what I understand, my dad was named after their child. And my dad also didn't have a middle name, which is kind of weird, but
They had a child named
whatever.
too.
Birth.
Sorry, I couldn't use this.
No, it's cool. But like I think my dad was like, fuck it, I'm happy, you know? Or like maybe it was more like, fuck it, I'm not miserable.
Well, and that kind of like, you know, I mentioned before about you having a little more worldly knowledge, but I always kind of got more so from Brad too. And like, I'm sure we'll talk about your brother a lot, but just kind of like a freedom, like not worrying so much about that. I guess kind of juxtaposed to, you know, how I kind of, what I got from my parents. There was
like I've always thought about the future, and there have been conversations I had with my mom where like I was thinking like 10, 20 years into the future, and her response was like, wow, I just always thought about the day to day. And it's like, seriously? So like I don't know where I get it from, because like you mentioned, my brother, he's kind of like I mean, I know he's smart, but I don't know if he's looking day to day when he was younger. I think he looks out a little more now. But that guy has been financially more successful than me for like a almost 2 decades, like a decade and a half, and that fucker barely graduated high school, did not go to college, and like granted, I was not an honor student or anything, but I easily graduated high school with putting little to no effort in, and I got a degree, and I fucking struggled for years, and it's not like I had any feelings towards my brother where it was like, man, fuck you, but I was kind of like what's with this? I did the right things by the book, and here I am struggling.
Right.
And but like that dude got into sales, and the way he talks to people, like he was good and it fit with him, and like he kind of took it and ran.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to get back to your upbringing and
Yeah.
like what
So,
influenced you and how you were younger and like where
right.
you're at now.
Okay. So anyway, like I said, mom's side of the family was by that time primarily L.A. area.
Yeah, we
So
love it.
very stereotypical West Coast. Dad's family had,
So
you
she
know,
was Gidget.
no, not so much. No. But Dad's family had, over the years they migrated down through Michigan, and he was born in Wisconsin, grew up in upstate New York, actually in Niagara Falls.
Okay.
His family came out, I believe it was like 70, sometime between 70 72. And he came from a big family. He came from a Catholic family. He had, including himself, 9 brothers and sisters. Um,
Wow. I thought I
yeah,
had a big family.
yeah, it was very interesting, and I loved that family because they're one of those families that you could sit around the table and tell stories for hours about
Oh, that's cool.
interesting stuff, even not lame stuff, and uh, it's a
not
tight.
not the dumb shit we talk about.
Yeah, no, but I mean, in pretty tight knit group, they kind of say like either you're alone or you're not, either you get it or you don't. But anyway, so they came out in the early '70s, and he met my mom. Well, he never went to college. I think, kind of barely graduated high school, but a really smart guy,
Dude,
aptitude wise.
dude, I used to see the things that your dad would like build at work because he like it at least he was a fabricator, right?
Oh yeah, well there was
Yeah, yeah, like you'd show me pictures and I'd be like, "Holy shit, that is so cool."
yeah,
And I
yeah,
should have known back then that I should be getting into that because now I'm like, "Oh, look, I'm on a computer, beep boop," and
right.
like, fuck that. Like I really want to buy a welder and learn how to weld, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's
But
definitely an art form. And like I
oh
said,
yeah.
he he graduated high school, but how he learned it, he basically started out in a fabric. I think it was like a sheet metal forming shop somewhere down in Azusa, and started out sweeping floors, and just kind of through sheer will would
He
you
proved
know
his worth on the bottom and they gave him more opportunity.
Well, not so much that, but learning what he could from guys that were willing to show him stuff. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he
That's the
came up
smart way
through.
to do it.
Yeah, but I mean, he had a little bit of a struggle because he didn't have an engineering degree. But I mean, the guy could work in the same league with these engineers, guys with degrees all day long. So, and then I saw him. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, I remember probably before junior high, him going to courses to learn to do CAD
Oh,
engineering.
okay.
So here's this poor guy that never graduated high school or college, and he barely proficient to check his email if they even had email at that time, and having to learn all that. But so kind of like I said, I think my parents we never had a new car till I was probably almost 10.
Okay.
Not that we were poor, but my parents were just very frugal, and I mean, they got married real young. I think my mom was 19 or 20, dad was a year older, and kind of in the face of, like I said, my dad had a big family, and they were all kind of going through their party phase, and kind of looked at my parents like, "What are you guys doing? You're young," but they were just madly in love, and they dedicated themselves to it, and they did it. I mean, they bought their first house before I was born, and I was born within the year and a half after they got married. So, like I said, I kind of, and looking back on it now, a lot of it comes from some undiagnosed anxiety that I kind of been dealing with over the years. But like I said, almost that fear of like not being able to be self-sufficient, and almost to like stifling at times. Like you're almost afraid to take a chance because the implications could be disastrous.
Oh yeah, I
But
know what you mean.
and it wasn't in a negative way from me. It was always in a caring way, like a cautious way, maybe a little too cautious, but always in a caring way. But like I said, very from what I understand from people I know and have seen, a very unique relationship. I mean, there's very few people that get married that young that loved each other when they were that old and remained faithful and true, and still have the same great relationship all these years later. And I think a lot of that's shaped kind of the way I look at things too, because I've seen what I guess I value just the living a good life and having a good family life over the material that's kind of taken over the planet. But yeah, so
Do you remember your parents discussing anything politics related growing up? Like, can you look back and do you know like if they were registered Republicans or Democrats, or they didn't care, or
I
what?
think it was kind of maybe leaned toward the Republican, but back then it wasn't like it was now. It wasn't a big deal. I mean, I think there was a lot of cross-party voting depending on who was running, and I'm sure some races were more split, but no, I mean they kind of, we always had the news on, and Dad he did quite a bit of reading, and I think he was aware of what was going on, but just kind of not of interest. Kind of like we said before, just his world was his family, his work
Yeah.
life, the things that he was immediately taking care of. So, and I think given that climate, I never really. I mean, if you would have asked me when I was a kid, I probably would have said I was a Republican, but I wouldn't have known why or really what that meant.
Yeah, well, like a lot of kids tend to identify what their parents are,
Right.
so
Right.
that's probably one of those things. But like,
Well, and we grew up in the, through Reagan, Bush, those, how many years of Republican presidents, and
yeah,
um, but I never. I always remember there was a couple guys when I was in junior high, and that was about the time that either Clinton was about to get nominated or had been nominated very early on, and a couple guys, they kind of overwent that change from sixth grade to junior high. They were a little more mature, and they'd come to school with the newspaper, but they'd like to talk
would they pull
about,
it out of their briefcase?
yeah, some of them maybe, but they like to talk it up and stuff. But
Yeah.
other than kind of just paying attention to what was going on, I just never got into politics, and I I I guess just from my education and my interest in my family history, and uh just raised in a traditional I don't know what you call it, pre-millennium American public school education, where
Yeah.
and that's kind of interesting too, because we kind of I think about this a lot. We kind of started out in an era when, if we looked at the science books that we were reading back then and the history books, we would probably be laughing at it. Some of it would seem absurd just because either the knowledge is so much better now or the understanding of events and things like that. But and then you kind of go through the traditional learning about the government and the founding of the nation and those values. And, as a young person, you have that kind of sense of patriotism and
Oh, so um, it just popped in my head your comment about patriotism and school. I remember, and like I'm not going to name names, but I remember when we were in high school, it was either sophomore or junior year, uh, like every public school, they'd stand up and they'd do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I know what you're going to
And there was one person where in previous years, like at least I and probably everyone else looked at this person as normal. And it was like one point in school where this person ended up wearing a head covering and no longer stood for the pledge. And I kind of didn't know what to think about it. And at the time I thought, like my thinking was that person should probably just stand and not do anything out of respect, because it's a free country and you can do what you want. And I guess the argument would be, well, that person wants to sit down and not do the pledge, so
right.
like it's not quite the NFL seriousness, but I think that was my first exposure to like not civil disobedience, and not necessarily like, oh, there's a weirdo in the school, but it was like kind of along those lines of like, this person like doesn't look at everything the same as everyone else. And it's not that everyone else was like an automaton, but like there was kind of a general consensus of like, America's a great country.
Well, and I remember the event. And just to clarify, I do recall she always wore the head covering.
Oh, okay.
It was just that, and I don't recall what the circumstance was, but on this particular occasion, she didn't stand up, and of course the teacher in the room got upset at her. But where was I going with that? Oh, I guess what kind of shocked us about it was, like I said, we were all very, I think even for now's time, more so progressive and accepting. And, I mean, we had the second Woodstock and all this stuff, man. We were going to change the world, and we believed it. We were living it, right? But it was the first time that we had seen somebody dissent just for the sake of dissent, not in defiance to some unjustness or some wrong, but just more or less a fuck you, And
yeah, see, like
it was just kind of like, why at this point? Why in this way? We were just kind of puzzled, like,
yeah, and like
what changed?
Looking back, I don't know if it was that way from that day forward, or if it was just that day, like, I don't feel like it today, but tomorrow maybe I will.
If I recall, the conversation was had that, she will stand at least and acknowledge the flag salute, if not salute the flag, but...
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think today it would be like, sweetie. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to use the word sweetie. Young lady. Oh, mate, no, I'm sorry, not young lady. Human being.
Yeah,
Please do what makes you comfortable, and don't sue us, and we're not racist.
Yeah. It's gotten quite absurd, hasn't
it? Yeah. So like I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no.
like because you mentioned that, I wanted to
so anyway,
throw that out
like
there.
I said, I don't know if it was just more so because of me. I'm a guy that raised on movies, John Wayne movies and war movies and stuff. So like I said, kind of, when you think you're getting a little
Tom
more
Mix movies.
Yeah, things like that, and through junior high, you start to, like I said, kind of develop that sense of patriotism. Like you always see the young men in the war movies marching off to war, kind of that sense.
Yeah.
But we had a couple really good teachers that, one of them just kind of started, this is in high school then, started teaching things in a more complete way. And it was kind of the first time, like I said, going back to the way things used to be taught when we were real little, it was more of a, well, this is what they've always said, but this is really the way it happened, or at least how
yeah.
in it. You know, and then we had another teacher that taught us government, but taught us, and I'll always be grateful for it, taught us government in a way of questioning it, of it being something you must participate in and exercise and question and
So
even with some skepticism if necessary.
So to that, I remember because we had the same government class.
Yeah.
I remember there was a video on, and he mentioned that the people in the video are like mainly 18 to 21, and he said and he said like, but they look older than that. And you were wise enough to chime in and say, "Oh, they look way older than you."
Dude, was I really that much of a smartass?
Yes, you were. Yes, you were. Yeah, I totally remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, good times. But and then that kind of carried over, and I think me and you too, because even back then, early on when we knew each other, I think that's when we really hit it off and really quickly started having just some really deep conversations about, just different ideas and philosophies and kind of questioning each other's values and, but also going into college, I had a couple really good professors that not only taught me things in a way to kind of question who's telling the story and their perception and how it's taught, but I guess also to kind of temper your beliefs, and luckily I never made too much of a fool of myself, but you start to become hypersensitive to people, whether it's in the media or just people arguing about this or that, and kind of like we were talking about in the email, using hyperbole and getting flustered and making a damn fool of themselves, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I just over the years have developed a more, I guess I'd say like a standoff kind of approach to politics. Because like I said, back when probably started around the Obama time, I just had to kind of tune out. And there's times where I feel like I should be more responsible and educate myself more about all this stuff going on. But then there's that other part of my brain that's like, dude, it's so fucked up, and it doesn't matter if everybody knows everything going on. It's not going to fix it, But I don't know, I go back and forth. There's that one side of me that just wants to kind of say fuck it and go on and just let things unfold as they do. But then there's that other side of me that, at times sees some pretty disturbing things, and it's like, I don't want to be someone that's caught off guard, and you just gotta, just for the sake of taking care of yourself and your family, kind of protect it, no matter where it's coming from, and it's kind of a scary thing when there's so much divisiveness in the country, and any given week, any different time, there's these powder keg issues where you think, man, it wouldn't take, and we see it all the time. You get those fringe people that end up doing something really stupid and causing all kinds of commotion. But all it takes is someone to set off something in motion that just snowballs into God knows what, and
so
people just seem to be so apprehensive and ready to go off,
Yeah, but I think that things won't go off until people are hungry. And that's when people get desperate. And so like not to go down too much that road. I think we can maybe get into that a little next episode, like where we think we're at now and where we're heading. but I'd like to know more about like, so you graduate high school and a lot like me, you're kind of maybe a little Republican leaning, but not really that aware of politics in general. But and like even now you mentioned that you're kind of at arm's length, but you have like certain principles that you live by and
Oh yeah.
but like my question is if if Trump and Pelosi and Schumer came to you and they said, Mike, we know you can solve it all. You can make everyone happy. What would you structure it? Like, how would you have it? So, like, if it was all up to you, what would it look like?
Well, I mean, I'll expand upon it, but it kind of goes back to before when I asked you what it would look like, what fixing it would look like. Um, I don't know. I mean, my initial reaction would be to go back to something a much more limited uh, republic, democracy, whatever you want to call it. Knowing where this leads after 200 plus years, having the built-in safeguards to basically make it impossible to eventually backdoor certain parts of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I mean, as an American, I would find that a good place to start. The problem is I've gone to extremes, like we were kind of talking about. So I got out of high school. I probably would have identified. Actually, back then, I know I would have told you I was independent, just because I was kind of fuck politics.
Yeah.
Then I kind of went through a bit of a phase where I was kind of lean, I guess, more extreme, for me anyway, like libertarian type leanings. When I say extreme, I just mean like, extreme downsizing of government to a basic level and stuff. But then you kind of temper that when you start looking at, and I know people like to say roads and things as simple like that, but there's just a lot of stuff that unfortunately we take for granted right now that we require, or at least are comforted by, a certain amount of government oversight. I don't think all government's bad. I certainly think our current government is just beyond. I think what changed my view was I just kind of going back to what we were talking about is like our education and our upbringing and stuff. And even like in conversations me and you had back then, is I always got this sense that logic would win out. That even, well, really,
I wish. I wish.
I know that's idealistic, but you think, yeah, fuck, man. I mean,
Well, no, it's not idealistic. It seems reasonable. Like that's what should
but
happen.
that's what I'm saying is I just assumed that everybody accepted this as the best way to conduct things in general, and I mean, I guess it kind of seemed that way for a while, and I mean, the government had all its issues, but it seemed to kind of self-correct itself to a certain degree. And I know it's been a slow change over a lot of years, but that just changed at some point, and it's completely absurd now. And things happen daily that you're like, Jesus Christ, are you serious? People
Yeah.
aren't people aren't going to jail for this. People aren't being deported and God knows what for, and it's really disheartening because there's someone that tries to,
It's almost as if someone has a plan, huh?
I don't know, man.
Jumping back down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, but I kind of dwell on that too, and it's like I don't know that there's a master plan. I think the plan is to just continue to create divisiveness and confusion and, divide and conquer basically, because we're already clearly a consumer society that, lives for the next, not personally so much, but lives for the next iPhone and, you know, who the hottest YouTuber is despite what their content is.
It's
And
us.
yeah,
We're the
well,
hottest
you know,
YouTubers.
we'll make an exception in that case. But, you know, I don't know, man. I don't know if we're past the point of change. I mean, it's like, and I don't mean this in a violence sense. I mean this in a sense of people and their ideologies and their outlooks on the world is like, we're going to have to crack a few eggs, man. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I see these people and I'm really, I used to get infuriated, incensed, to the point of rage when you would hear these people just going on about, you know, who knows what, whatever the issue of the day is. And I've kind of come around to where I really pity them now, because I think a lot of those people, at some point, sooner if not later, reality's going to smack them in the face, you know? I think that's the problem, is nobody has, not that we had any kind of hardship, but we were aware of hardship, and we knew, I think a lot of it too was we correlated a day's work with being productive, you know, and that's how you got where you were going, not the next scheme or the next, you know, I don't know, man.
Yeah. So do you have anything else about like specific that you'd like to bring up about like maybe our uh like your upbringing or shared history that we might have? Because I think we're at a point now where like kind of maybe a little vague about about who we are, but I think this is a good starting point where I've thrown out names like Molyneux and um, uh, I think anarchy as ancient Greece would define it would be the solution. But and like I think people well like not to open up a new topic, but I'm basically, and I think the meme that I showed earlier was like, fuck it all. But if you're some lame ass that's going to be bagging on America, like, whoa, hold up, like we have in our founding documents that basically sums up the greatest nation in the history of the world. You know, everyone's equal.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
done. We don't need anything else. And like some people might argue like all men are created equal, but guess what? That's how language used to be back then.
Right.
Like all men meant all humans,
Right.
you know? So it was a different way to say things of like all human beings, you know? And so I think that in those founding documents, if people would internalize them as their values, that we could have a good society today. And I think you and I are in agreement where if there was a law and all lawmakers said like we're going to give up the FBI, the CIA, like all of these different alphabet agencies, and we're going to have the Constitution, but we're going to rewrite the Second Amendment so it can't be interpreted as only well-regulated militias by the government can have guns, you know, where it's just going to be everyone can have a gun, you know, and like granted, that's kind of extreme phrasing, but I think that's historically better proven than government says no guns.
Yeah.
And granted, you don't have to sign off on that and be like, oh yeah, I'll do my big John Hancock on that new Declaration of Constitution. I know I combined the two. That's
No, I mean
shit I
it's
do.
definitely it's a complicated issue. I mean, I'm definitely um, you know, pro private ownership of firearms, and I think it's, you know, beyond just self protection of your family and your homestead, but uh, you know, I think people too often scoff anymore at the sense uh, of people being able to keep a government at bay. And I think that's just a concept that's lost on too many people right now, and they don't see it, but uh, I'm a student of history, and time again, you see that if there is a group of people that can be exploited in some way, and another power has control or the ability to control them, it will happen, and
Yeah.
people like to paint this shiny picture of the government. I know I'm kind of skipping around here. I'm from the Second Amendment to this, but people like to paint this rosy picture of California, United States and capitalism, and that we have this freedom. And I don't think so, man. I used to think about it this way. What is really different between, let's not even call it socialism, let's talk about Soviet era communism and the analog of America at the time? What was the difference? Because you can call it private, public. The only difference is we did it in a better way that made more people happy, but the same outcome happened. I mean, we produced more, which made the private ownership obviously more profitable, but it's all the same thing in the end. I mean, whether you're born into a communist system or you live in our capitalist system, you're still a slave to it. I mean, yeah, it's possible to live outside the system and live credit free and live off the grid and all those things, but it's definitely not easy in this society, and it's not the norm. And um, in a lot of ways, I see it as just as enslaving as a communist or socialist or totalitarian. It's just done under the guise of this is all for you, and by the people for the people. And
So I'd like to speak to that point. I got one other tidbit, and then I think maybe by the time I'm done, unless you have
yeah,
anything,
no, we're
that
gonna
it
peter
would be
out
good
here.
to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So, so I think when it comes to capitalism versus communism, a lot of people talk about them as economic platforms, but capitalism can be run without a government because it's like, hey, I have a drill press, I
Right.
have an aluminum block, I'm going to start making some
And
AR
I was
lowers.
referring more to our form of government and socioeconomic back then, or
Yeah,
even now to an extent.
so I think at least at one point in American history, the powers that be internalized the values of the Constitution. But there's a quote from George Bush the Younger where he basically says the Constitution is just a piece of paper. And when I first heard that, I thought, no, wait, it's the Constitution. But it is just a piece of paper unless you're taught to uh, to internalize the values of the Constitution. It is just a piece of paper, you know. And when George Bush the Younger, when his grandfather is known for being a banker for the Nazis and wanted to overthrow the government, of course the Constitution is just a piece of paper, you know. And if anyone's out there, just look it up. Like
Oh, it's true.
whoever
Yeah. No, it's
Bush, like
legit.
it's legit. It's not conspiracy
Yeah.
stuff. But so my other point is, um, and this is completely separate from anything we've talked about, but I'm actually traveling for my regular 8 to 5 this week, and I'm like normally I work from home, not this beautiful garage, but and I would consider it my safe space because I can say whatever I want here and there's no worries. I find people that I work with and I find the like-minded people and I share stuff with them. But I actually have a sticker on my work-provided laptop that reads 9/11 was an inside job. And then it's like discover the truth or something like that. and it reads like Infowars.com, whatever, Prison Planet. So I'm actually curious if I'm still going to be employed when we do this next time, because while I'm not going to discuss who I work for, it's like I kind of alluded that it's indirectly working for the man, and the type of company that I work for isn't like the people that work there aren't necessarily the most open-minded and willing to discuss about ideas. So I am like I've actually thought about just putting masking tape over the sticker or removing it, but I thought this is gonna either be really, really good in any number of ways, or really, really bad where I have to come home and explain to my wife, hey, do you think we can make it on unemployment?
Yeah.
You know? So like it's gonna be kind of an experiment.
The bad news is I lost my job. The good news is we got a case of supplement coming soon.
The good news is we got government cheese. But I'm actively keeping this sticker on my laptop because I'm truly curious if anyone's going to freak out. And I've been thinking about ways that I can mitigate any reaction so in full disclosure, and I'll probably say that a lot throughout this show, not just this episode, but like I acquired that sticker because I ordered something from that company. But I've been thinking about ways where I can possibly like quell the situation, where I can say like, oh, a buddy put it on my laptop and I thought it would be funny, or like I just have it on there to see what people's reactions are, you know.
Dude,
but
you're so hipster.
So my oldest son has actually called me a hipster, and like my reaction was like whatever, and he said that actually makes me more of a hipster.
Yeah,
whatever.
I'm gonna
but
punch you when I see
but
it.
like I do tend to not like mainstream things just because they're mainstream, but that's
Right.
kind of lame. But like if I have any interactions, I will definitely update you. But like just for this reason alone, I'm super excited about this trip and the kind of reaction that I'm going to have.
Well, I wish you the best with that.
Yeah,
have to
thank
let
you.
me know how it
Thank you.
goes.
I'm curious if part of it is another way how early on I said I need to do something, and I think this is a way to kind of test the waters where the vast majority of people that I interact with are like they might have different points of view, and the last time I went there I heard phrases like Trump's America, and I was talking to another friend of mine like when Trump first entered the race, and I told him like Trump is the best bet for America. And at the time I thought he's a businessman, he has the best opportunity to set the country right. But I think more recently it was put into a term that I agree with more, but he's the first person in a long time to really get back on the road to freedom. Not to say that he has a lot of good ideas, but more than anything, he's like, if nothing else, the idea of like, wait a minute, America for Americans. And I think that if he wasn't elected, and if she would have been elected, there would have been a lot of sentiment that's going around today of where white people running from president are like, it's not cool that I'm white. And it's like, you can't change that about yourself. So why are you a self-hating honky, you know? But
Upside down and
so yeah, I think we can get into other things. Like I think about this stuff nonstop. So and like I think we can kind of wrap up where you said, what do I have in mind for this show? And I did like the broad overreaching goal of like another voice in the mix. Like
Yeah.
I like Louder with Crowder. I think he produces some good content. And like he's on Facebook and on YouTube. So maybe we'll hang out for a while if we're not yelling about the Chi-Coms and all of that shit.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of guys that I found recently that have a dialogue a lot like this. Probably better produced content at the time. But who knows? Maybe this time next year we'll be giving them a run for their money.
Yeah.
But they're called the Asian Capitalists, and like I recommend them. And hey, they're non-whites, but although they're next in line for like you get the fuck back because you're doing too good. But so my plan is throughout, and like there's some topics that I think that we'll be able to hash out without like, hey, I found this stuff throughout the week. But like I'm on Reddit and I'm on a couple of other platforms, and my plan, as far as if we need to get content or if we're looking for something to talk about, or if there's something in the news, is I'm just gonna like bookmark or save these different topics throughout the week. And if it's not one of these subjects where it's like, oh dude, I think we should talk about this, like I think one of the things that needs to be talked about is the political spectrum.
Yeah.
You know? And just how I don't even know what the political spectrum is, but I see it as a spectrum of violence. And you have authoritarians on one side and you have freedom-minded people on the other, you know?
Yeah.
And like, but like we can totally get into that some other time. But my idea is like, I'm basically going to be clipping the newspaper, and come next Friday or Saturday, whenever we do this, it'll be like, dude, I got these 10 things that we can talk for hours about, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, this was picked up on the fly. I mean, when did we start talking about this?
Was it Wednesday or Thursday?
It was Wednesday. And
Yeah.
like I told you, this has been a hell of a couple weeks for me. It's, I'll tell you off the air, but by the time my last day on Friday, it had been rough. So
Yeah.
you're probably lucky you got me tonight. 'Cause I kind of just wanted to crash for the whole weekend, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
know what you mean. But and like I think you share this sentiment where like I wanted to strike while the iron is hot. I didn't want to be like, oh, let's test it out, let's do a test recording. Like
yeah,
I'm gonna download this from
yeah,
Skype
yeah.
and I'm gonna throw it up on YouTube. You know,
Right,
I'll send you
right.
the link after it's already up there.
Yeah,
And like like I said, it's gonna be a big turd bowl for the first like however long. And not that our discussion is bad, but like camera quality might need to be improved.
oh
Might
yeah,
need better
yeah,
mics, or like who knows what. Maybe I'll get a green screen and I'll be in Tahiti, you
yeah.
know.
Well,
But
like even the things I forgot about since I made some YouTube vids years ago is just being conscious of time and moving along, and but that's all stuff like you said that comes with repetition.
well yeah, but like I think with if it was just you or just me and we were doing it on our own, I think we'd have to be more conscious of that.
Oh
But
yeah,
I think when there's someone else to feed off of,
yeah, yeah, sure,
that it'll mosey along better.
right.
And I think we should end with like, subscribe, click whatever the shit down
Yeah,
below is needed, and peace out and word to your mother, right? All right. So what
it
the
was real,
fuck
bro.
are we calling this, right? Great things are simple,
Yeah, great things
right?
are
Isn't
simple.
that
Or
it?
simple. Simple,
Yeah. Uh,
simple, simple
this is
D and simple Mike.
yeah, this is yeah, great things are simple. So
Yeah.
I know that sounds lame as far as like, why does he not know the name of his own show? That's because we fucking named it today, okay?
Yeah, dude, that was on the fly.
Uh,
But you know what, dude?
yeah,
That fit, and I'm sure we'll get into that later. But yeah,
yeah, yeah,
let's
yeah. I think maybe in our either anniversary show or the 100 whatever.
yeah, let's
That,
start
that
planning for that one.
that's a long way off. But
Yeah.
at some point we'll have to have a show where we're actually in person.
Oh hell yeah, dude. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
we'll make that happen.
yeah.
Well, it was good
Okay,
talking
so
to you, and I look forward to the next one for sure.
yeah, dude. And like keep it up during the week. Not this
Yeah.
whole thing, but like ideas to bounce off of.
Yeah.
And dude, do your fingers below for liking and subscribing. We'll get like a Patreon or some shit if you think that someone needs a better mic. Oh, click here, click here, click here, click here. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording because this shit is gold.
Nah, bro.
Okay.